on TV. What's it?
That's just turning it. No sagging.
Well, you can get on TV and sell that. Get you an infomercial on TV.
My teeth. No, she saves everything to eat later, you know. She got it all. I thought she got a rag around her neck every time you see her, come up her wrinkles. She don't put a facelift up so much and stuff.
Y'all getting too deep for me. Well, I think we better go ahead and start since I'm sitting here in front of this camera. Good morning. Glad to see all y'all. Sorry it's been so long.
Yeah, it's good to see you. We thought maybe you went on vacation or something.
You could call it that. No, I worked the last 4 weekends, so.
Well, that's a good thing. You're not complaining, are you?
Yes.
A lot of people are not working.
I know that. And I'm
a lot of people don't want to work.
I don't either. I'm tired of it.
Get hungry if you don't.
Yeah, that's true. You get hungry.
No, they don't either. Gimme.
Well, they should be happy for the next 2 or 3 years anyway. But that's beside the point. The lesson this morning is partly from Matthew, partly from Hebrews, and I have a little bit of trouble understanding the text in Matthew. I'll be honest with that. I do not quite see what Christ was trying to say. But the purpose of the lesson is to understand about worship, and worship it's not really supposed to be so much for us, it's to acknowledge God's presence. And there's more that's talked about in this lesson about, it says here, reconciliation and fellowship with the family of faith. But in the Matthew passage, if y'all read it, it's where Peter asked Christ, part of it is where Peter asked Christ, how many times should I forgive my brother if he sins against me? And Christ says, Peter says 7 times. Christ says 7 times 70 or whatever, something like that. Just over and over. And right before that, he's talking about conflict resolution in the church, it sounds like. And if it's talking about if you have a conflict with another member, how to go about it. And all us old enough to know that if you feel like somebody has wronged you and you confront each other about it, then you know it's not going to ever get resolved. And it's like the lesson writing in the teacher book said, what's going to happen is both parties are going to leave the church. And that's generally what happens. So I don't pretend to understand just what it is Christ is saying here, and apparently from what I read, nobody else quite understands it. But I think the idea of it is if you have a conflict, don't let it fester. It's better to get it out, try to deal with it, and then move on. And you know, the churches have split up so many times, different denominations have split so many times over disagreements, pretty much. And I like what John Wesley said, and this is interesting. I can't remember if this is in a teacher's book or still. I think it was a teacher's book. But anyway, he was talking about if people don't think as you do. And he says basically, if it's not a disagreement about worship of Christ, which is very basic, if it's not about that, he said, just live and let live. And I think to be back in the Middle Ages, that's pretty forward thinking idea. John Wesley was a smart man, apparently. But, you know, we've had on the news, ooh, I can feel the heat now. We've had in the news last year or so, it's quieted down some now, but the problem hadn't gone away. You know, there's a divide in the Methodist Church worldwide. And there's a possibility that the Methodist Church may split. And I think what this lesson is saying is, you know, if that's what happens, that's what happens. But that doesn't change the fact that we're still, the church is there to worship God together and to try to do good. And I don't think that that needs to stop just because people don't agree. You know, if we end up with two Methodist churches, we'll just end up with two Methodist churches, just like we got 2,000 Baptist churches and 2,000 every other kind of church. Humans are going to have conflict and disagreements, and it's just not going to go away. And we don't need to hate each other because of it. You know, we've got enough hate in this country right now to last us a right good while, and I feel that it ain't over. I feel that it's only going to get worse. You know, we don't, and so much ugliness. And people really looking at each other as though they were less than human almost. And the church don't need to do that. That's not what the church is for. The church is primarily to acknowledge that God is here, present, and to worship God, and to be able to do it together is more valuable than to just do it apart. You know, there's a lot of people who, and this is strange, there's a lot of people in the world who, if you listen to surveys, who claim to know Christ and accept Christ, but they never go to church. And I think they're missing out on something that's very important. I think the idea of worshiping together it's empowering for all of us as humans, as Christians. You know, the fact that our churches have kind of gotten broken up by this coronavirus mess is an example of how easy it is to stop church, stop people going, and how much it affects us. I think all of us have been really upset by the fact that we haven't been able to have church like we used to have it. And
Kim, I see that breaking down the church and then breaking down the neighborhood. You don't see your neighbor like you used to and stuff. And that's why you gonna go your way and they gonna go that way. That's a communism.
Yeah, I think so too, but I don't want to get into that really in this lesson because we get so far off track. And I don't think I agree with you 100%, but I don't want to get too far into that. But getting back to trying to finish summarizing this passage in Matthew, Jesus is saying, I think that you're going to have conflicts, and it's best to deal with it and be done with it. And he says something that's strange. He says, if you can't get a resolution of your conflict and a person will not admit, hey, I did something wrong, then treat them as a Gentile or tax collector. And I don't know if that means to shun them like the Jews would have done, or does it mean to see them as somebody who needs to be won over? I don't know. As some of y'all know, you know more than I do about it. Again, I don't think none of these Bible scholars know either, because I've seen too many different opinions just reading about this here lesson today. But another thing I think is more important than worrying about conflicts is that Jesus says, where any two or three of you are gathered in my name, I'm there also. And I think that goes back to the idea of worshiping together to acknowledge God's presence. I think that's an important part. I think it's the most important part of worship, actually. I mean, all of us feel like, I do, that it kind of recharges, gives us some peace to put up with the idiots in the world that we got to work with for the next week. And that's ugly to say that, but that's the way we feel sometimes. We all, I think, feel like it kind of recharges us. It gives us some strength. And it does.
It gives us a chance to come back. Just what we've got here in Sunday school is giving me a feeling of coming back to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And I know Christ is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But when you enter in his house of worship, you usually feel more closer to him there than you do if you're out digging in your yard sometimes.
True. And I think your attention ain't divided. I think the fact of taking time out to come together to worship God is important. I think that helps us to say, okay, yeah, I believe in God, but I'm busy. I got to go do this, and then I got to go so I can go to the lake tomorrow. That's not the way God wants to be worshipped. He wants us to acknowledge him as creator. And when we stop what we're doing, take time to come together, I think it's better. I think it's more beneficial. And I think that God appreciates it more. And then moving on a little bit to the Hebrews passage, it's just saying that by Christ shedding his blood for us, it opened up basically the Holy of Holies, which was, if you ever remember reading about the temple in Jerusalem, it had and I think Don Rhodes touched on this some, it had different places you could go depending on who you were. The Gentiles could only get in the outside yard. The Jews could go in the next yard. The women couldn't go no further than that. The Jewish men could go actually to the inside of the temple. And then there was another room closed off, only the priests could go. And then in the very back, the Holy of Holies was a big curtain or something kept the altar covered. Only the high priest could go there, and only at certain times. He couldn't just walk in there and sit down and eat his lunch if that's what he wanted to do. He could only go on days that they were sacrificing to God. And the penalty for violating them rules was death. And I don't know if Paul wrote the letter to the Hebrews or somebody else that Paul had trained. Nobody really knows, I don't think. But it's saying that by Christ sacrificing himself to us, he has taken away all the gates and walls and allowed us through him to go straight to God. And in worship, in prayer. And so that's the imagery that they have in Hebrews. Is Christ is that curtain. And when his body was torn, it tore that curtain open. So it doesn't make us seem so far from God. I know back in the Middle Ages, I mean, we know how strict the Hebrew faith is and how many rules they got. Back in the old times, like in the Middle Ages, the church was mostly the Catholic Church, or the Christian church was, and you could not, you had to go through the priest kind of to get your prayers before God. It was considered, if you just sit down and prayed yourself, that wasn't valid, really. You had to go through the priest, and he was your mediator. And not liking that idea is part of what led to the Protestant church, breaking off from the Catholic Church. There's another split in the church. But the whole idea of worship is to be closer to God. And I think in Hebrews, that's kind of what they're talking about, that Christ has allowed us to be closer to God than we ever could have been before. That's the meaning I get out of this. It says Christ is now a great high priest. And, Christ said over and over that if you ask of me, the door will be open. So it's no big curtain up there anymore to keep us away from God. Excuse me. I think that's what's important. And going back a little bit to the Matthew passage, I want to emphasize again that, we're going to always have conflicts in the church with your neighbors and your family. As we've been watching for the last, seemed like forever, in this country, we got terrible conflicts and splits. And I think what Jesus is trying to say in Hebrews is you're going to have conflicts, but you just move on past conflicts. You don't hate because of disagreement like we're doing so much in this country. I don't think when we start hating other people, then we're judging those people. And I'm tired of seeing people act ugly to each other. And I think we need to get past that. We need to remember that Trump's not in control, Biden's not in control, Nancy Pelosi's not in control. None of these people that think they're in control are. God is in control. And, God tells us to not judge others, to care about others. And basically, Jesus says, and he says it many times, he says, if you can't care about other people, then you don't care about me. And he says, I'm keeping score and I'm going to remember it. So I think the important thing we need to do is remember, no matter what, we're all God's children. We all need to just move on, remember that whether we disagree or not, the church is not going to go away. God's not going to go away. Jesus is not going to go away. And the church is going to go on. We've had conflicts and disagreements in this church over the years. We've had people leave and come and go. And but this church has still been here for how many years now? Around 250 years, something like that. It's all up there. And I think this church will continue to be here. Unless they outlaw churches, which I think they might, but I think it'll be here even then. You know, I think about sometimes in certain parts of the world, you know, back in the Bible times, the Christian church was persecuted right heavily. In certain parts of the world, they are now. They're persecuted to the point of death in certain parts of the world. And if those people can risk their life to worship, you know, we got it pretty easy in this country so far. Why can't we can't make it to church to worship, and those people can make it to worship, and somebody's going to kill them if they find out. So, you know, we don't need to think we are all that much better than everybody else, that we deserve it so easy. The people who worship knowing their life is in danger, that's commitment to worshiping God. You know, it looks pretty weak for us to take any excuse not to worship when those people don't offer excuses not to worship. And I think that's an important thing to remember. So the church is going to go on throughout the world, whether we go on here or not. And the coronavirus and nothing else is not going to stop the church if people still want to worship God. And I think it's important they remember to do that. We remember to do that.
Well, even before the virus, a lot of people were looking for excuses not to go to church.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know what we can do to change it. But a lot of young people in their 20s and whatnot, 30s, don't go because they don't feel like it's relevant to them. It's what good is it doing? What's it doing? What's it mean to me? I know kids that don't go that the parents go. I know kids that was raised in it, and when you get to a certain age, it's like I think you feel like you don't need God or something. I don't know. But I hear that a lot from younger people, that why should I go to church? What's it gonna do for me?
We got a hard time or something really happened, and the first thing they want to do is call on the Lord.
Yeah.
And they haven't showed respect to him up till then.
Well, the teacher man, I call on social services first. But no, I think that's a lot of it. I think when you're young, you don't believe nothing bad gonna happen, and you believe that you're your own boss, and you don't need another boss, I guess. I really don't know, but I hear that a lot from younger people. I don't know how the church can get around that. I really don't. But I think that's a large reason. I hear people say, oh, people in church is hypocrites, and that's why I don't go. But I don't think that's the main reason, because people are hypocrites everywhere. I think the biggest thing younger people don't see that is relevant to them in any way. And yet it is, whether they realize it or not.
But Tim, there's something I was reading and doing the part that I did, that like if you have two people in the church that have a conflict, that you need to go to each other and try to settle it. If you can't, then call in 2 more witnesses to help you settle it. And then if it still can't be settled, then it's when you go to the church, I guess the church council or whatever on, something in your church. And then if they can't, and the Lord can't get you to settle it, then that's when you say, well, so be it. I mean, you've tried.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of times we've had conflicts in this church, but I personally have disagreed with some of the things that were done, but I don't hold a grudge against anybody for it.
Well, you know, everybody has the different opinions, but
Right.
and I don't agree with everything either, but it's my church, and I ain't ready to give it up
That's
because
it.
I don't agree with somebody. I
And
think,
sometimes it ends up, they were better at what you did. than
right,
I
they
was.
might have been more right than you
Yeah.
would. But, I just ain't, I don't want, it's my church, I don't want to give it up. It's that simple to me. And we got a couple more minutes left. I done said all I can think of to say. But I did enjoy that thing that you wrote about the front yard, the backyard. I thought that was pretty neat because if we like you, you come in the back door of our house and through the backyard. If we don't like you, we keep you at the front door.
That's right, and the people see you know you from the front yard,
Yeah.
they don't know the back yard, which your life is back there.
You're right there. Most everybody's life is in the backyard. I never really thought of it that, but that was pretty neat.
That's where your barbecue is.
Yeah, that's where your junk is too.
I was gonna bring up too, the one that I said, about the people that come to church 3 times in their lives.
Yeah.
You know what that's at. Anyway, you're what, hatched, matched, and dispatched.
Yeah.
That's 3 times they come to
Yeah.
church.
That's about right.
When they're born, they're christened, then they come back to get married, and then when they get died, they come back.
Yeah. That's about right.
Yeah, but yet they're Christian.
So they say.
Yeah, if you ask them in a survey, they accept Christ and they believe in Christ, but they don't worship Christ. So I don't get it.
I thought it was good too, that brought up like on Tim Allen's show, Home Improvement, how you never see Wilson's face, his next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Our next door neighbor may not really see our face as such that they don't know what kind of life we really live. We keep it hid. And sometimes we got off if we kept somebody hid.
Yeah. Well, as long as you don't never see your neighbor, you'll get along with them fine.
I get along with mine.
Yeah, I'm too much like Dad. I don't want nobody right around me.
Now, I couldn't live in town where you were so close together.
Me
everybody
neither.
sees
I can't
everything
stand
you do. But, like, in our neighborhood, there's 2 or 3 that I don't know really good, but most of them, we call each other and check on each other.
We don't do a lot of calling and visiting our neighborhood, but everybody knows what everybody's doing. Because somebody's always riding around watching. And if they see something out of place, they're going to stop checking on
Kind of like my neighbor said, he had to cut the limbs off his tree so I could see over his house.
it. Well, he must appreciate you watching his house. Anybody got anything else to add?
I'm just hoping this virus will hurry up so we can get back together, because I think when you come to church to worship the Lord, there's a different fellowship.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
It's a whole different atmosphere.
Yeah, you feel different.
You do, you really do. And as I've always said, even in snow and stuff, when I had walked to church one time, very seldom enough, it's something about coming to church on Sunday that makes me make it through the rest of the next week.
Yeah.
And maybe it was because this past week I really needed to get to the Lord on Sunday.
Yeah.
I miss it.
That's what me and Joe always have said, that going to church on Sunday keeps her from killing somebody at work the next week. And then when Sunday gets around, you need another dose.
Yeah. Working with public and other people is not easy. It's not easy.
No, it ain't.
No, but we need the contact with human beings.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
You do.
We're that kind of an animal. We need the contact. Or I do.
I do too. You know, I told Johnny here lately, they staying at home more. I kind of enjoyed my home a lot.
Not if you're by yourself.
Yeah. I got somebody that helps me
When
though.
you don't have them, it's different.
Yes, indeed. I'm sure it is. You get lonesome. Mama did.
Who you gonna complain to?
Yeah.
And one of your little dogs is undone, so he can't hear you.
Well, he hears, but he don't know what I'm saying. He
Yeah.
just stands there and wags his tail.
Well, let me turn this thing off.
TV.
Oh, I do need to mention this. As far as I know, we'll do Sunday school again next Sunday. I don't think I have to work next Sunday.
Okay, good. If you don't, if you have to work, you can
I'll
let
let
me know, and
I'll let
I'll